I wasn't sure about sharing this story. It still gives me shivers every time I remember what happened. This happened in the Amazonas, in the border between Brazil and Peru. The jungle was an amazing place to live. Everyone knew each other, and I had a big group of friends of different ages. The only horrible part of the Amazon is the existence of certain groups that try to control the region. I was 7 when this happened. Every kid in the village knew we had freedom to go anywhere, as long as it wasn't close to these certain groups, and that we could never leave the village at night. My parents taught me since I was very little how to hide in case something happens, and to run if I see things that get dangerous. I remember all adults of the village were celebrating something. I think it was the equivalent to Halloween. I remember my mother painting her face in a tribal way, and all the children went together to a house to stay safe and have fun. The eldest girl was in charge. She was 17, and as soon as our parents had left, she ignored us and she left with her friends. Our closest group consisted of 6 children. I was one of the youngest ones, and we all listened to the most adventurous one, Leon, who was 14. Whatever Leon said, we followed, because he was fun, always making challenges, and he knew how to take care of us. Yes, despite him being reckless, he was our friend. We loved him, and knew he would never abandon us if something happened. After playing soccer and eating, these 6 of us had become bored. Carla, one of the 6, had the idea to dress up like our parents did, with tribal makeup and dresses. We agreed, and soon, we were all dressed up like the kids who lived in the village of the deepest regions of the Amazon. I remember us playing around until Leon said to, and I quote, "Let's explore the Amazon and find a hidden treasure." We all cheered and agreed to leave. It was easy to escape, since the girl who was supposed to take care of us had left. Leon managed to find a lantern and a boat big enough for the 6 of us, and we decided to sail off. It was around midnight, but we didn't care. Just imagine 6 kids dressed up on a boat, splashing water everywhere and trying to find an imaginary treasure. No phones and no adults, just the jungle and us. It was life at its purest. Everything seemed to be perfect until we heard people calling. Who was there? And we saw a lighted boat approaching. Quickly, Leon dropped the lantern and instructed us to lay down on the boat's floor and stay very still. It was one of the scariest moments of my life. I remember clearly how we were all with our bellies to the floor, grabbing our hands and not even daring to breathe. But it was too late. "Stop hiding, I see you," a voice said as the guy illuminated our boat. We stood up and I saw 4 men with guns. I'm not talking about small pistols pointing at us. They laughed and said, "They're a bunch of kids." Leon put himself in front and said that we were on a hurry because our parents were expecting us home. The biggest guy, who had a red bandana, laughed again and said, "Little kids shouldn't be out here alone at night. You could disappear in the jungle and no one would ever find you." At this point, I was super scared and Carla started crying. "You can go. You're just tribe, hua hua," which means baby in the language. And they laughed. I remember all of us hugging each other, crying and sailing as quickly as we could. Once we got home, we entered the house and closed all the doors and windows. We all slept together on the floor, but before that, we agreed not to tell this to anyone in the village, not the elders or our parents, even though no one knows what happened that night. Years later, I understood why they let us go. They thought that we were kids from the local tribe. We had no value to them. If they had known that we were dressed up and were from the village, I probably wouldn't be typing this story. First off, I am living in a very rural, small village with maybe 10 to 15 houses, but close to the highway. You can drive there within maybe 5 minutes, and also about 10 minutes away from the town. If you cross the street, it'll take you about a 10-minute walk to reach the forest. First Christmas Day in the afternoon, my partner and I decided to go for a little digestive walk, as we were really full from all the food. It was about 5 p.m. and already dark when we had left, and we had brought big and bright LED flashlights with us. I also took my camera and my flash, as I love taking pictures of nature at night. We decided to walk on a little country road towards the forest and then turn right, following a small graveled cycle track close to the forest border, which connected our village and the next, and maybe 15 to 20 minute walk between villages. In the middle part of the track, you have to walk through a small bit of forest. It's rather dark and the trees are very high and quite dense. When we entered, I saw our flashlight reflected on something and recognized a car being parked there on the side of the road, close to the trees. This struck me as odd, as cars are not allowed to drive there, and the path is very narrow and hidden, so I was a bit cautious. My partner pointed to the light inside of the car and it seemed to be empty. I also noticed the windows were frozen, so it must have been parked there for a while. A bit in front of the car, I spotted a tree with an intriguing structure, and I asked my partner to point the flashlight towards it, so I could focus better and photograph it with my flash. After I took a few images, my partner told me, there's someone standing there, behind us in the middle of the road. He's looking at us. Nobody was following us the whole way. I kept looking around and behind us occasionally, because at this time in the evening, and close to the border of the forest, there are boars sometimes. It is mating season, so they're more aggressive than usual. And indeed, there was a man standing behind us, staying out of the flashlight's reach. He wasn't saying anything, just standing there and facing us. At first, I thought he might be startled, as it may seem a bit weird if someone's just taking photos around your car. It wasn't even legal to drive on that path with a car. I decided to get up and confront him from a distance, explaining to him that I was just taking photos of that tree. He didn't react and he just stood there. I then went on to ask him if he needed some light, and he replied that it wasn't necessary. It was odd, but I was calm, sure about there being a normal explanation for his behavior. Nonetheless, my partner and I decided to GTFO and followed the path leading to the next village. It was maybe 5 to 7 minutes until we reached it. I remembered the letters on his license plate, not numbers though, unfortunately, and I googled it, and it turned out that he was from a city about 6 hours away from our village. And mind you, the country that I live in is in a very strict lockdown right now, so you are only allowed to travel even by car if you have very urgent reasons. After we had reached the first lantern in the next village, we looked back and observed the car driving a bit out of the forest, turning around and going back inside. I was able to see that he had parked there again and turned the lights off. He didn't leave the forest. We then went home on a much longer way than initially intended, as I didn't want to go back there for obvious reasons. Our flashlight battery had died on the way and my phone battery was low, so I didn't want to call the police back then. But I called them as soon as I had arrived back home and gave them all the details. A big regret that I didn't memorize the whole license plate, but it was just so surprising that I seriously didn't think about it. Also, it only occurred to me as really strange when I thought about the frozen windows and that he couldn't possibly have walked behind us, plus him having no light and not responding. He did seem to be sneaking up on us when I sat down to take the photo. I think that I was very lucky to have my partner, the camera, and the bright light with me. I don't want to imagine what could have happened if I was alone. It happened during summer vacation when I was 11. Me and my parents always go to South India for at least 1 month to see the family. And during the entire month of June, there is what we call in our little village the Mango Festival. It's a religious festival where divinity statues are exhibited in parades. There is also a large alley filled all along with small temporary stands where people can buy lots of different stuff like street food, fruits, toys, clothing, and more at very cheap prices. My mom and I always go to these little stores in the evening at like 5 or 6 when it's already dark, because going during the daytime is too exhausting, with the unbearable heat plus the crowd. At that time, the alley is still very bright, enlightened by the stores and the decorative lighting. That day, my mom decided to stop at a shoe flip-flop stand to buy me some pairs. The seller proceeded to show my mom the collections, and when he noticed my presence, he had locked his eyes on me. At the beginning, it did not bother me that much. I just thought that it might look like somebody that he knew, but he just kept staring at me the whole time. He knew exactly the time to stare at me. When my mom was looking at my direction, he stopped, and then he would stare back again when she looked away. It was obvious at that point, and it made me feel very uncomfortable. Eventually, we had to leave without buying anything, but the seller insisted that we should come tomorrow because he had a new shipment or whatever new collections were arriving. 2 days after, my mom called me to go to the festival stands, but I was reluctant to go with her this time. I told her that I was tired and that I didn't want to, but she yelled at me saying that I'm always lazy and wasting my summer vacation by staying at home all day, so I went with her. Our first stop was at the cheap jewelry store, and then my mom made me do something that I always hated, but she did that all the time in order to help me with my shyness. She said, "Take my purse and go to the shoe stand by yourself and buy a pair that you like. I'll be watching you from here." I refused at first, but she progressively raised her voice, and to avoid being humiliated in front of the other kids, I did what she said. When he saw me approaching his stand, he welcomed me with his unsettling smile. He proceeded to show all the new sandals, and I was his only customer. He even took the time to put the sandals on me one by one, asking if it fit well. At this point, I just took whatever freaking shoe quickly to get out of there. And now, it was the time for the checkout. I was and still am stressed to order or to talk to a vendor. I used to stutter a lot during these social situations, but this time it was different. It wasn't only stress, but there was also this fear and this gut feeling, saying that this man was strange and that I shouldn't be here with him alone. I handed him the money and was waiting for my change, but his demeanor suddenly changed. He became fidgety and showed frustration over the cash register. He then said that the cash register had broke for some unknown reason and that it wouldn't open. I glanced outside to see if my mom was still watching me, and she was still observing. When we had made eye contact, she made a gesture with her hand, telling me to hurry. She was observing at an angle, and as I was next to the cash register at the corner, I couldn't see her properly anymore. At the same time, the seller told me that he had another register in the trailer. He then took my money and went to his trailer. It was a sort of open shop, so you could see his trailer if you were right in front of the shop. He went inside of it for a long time, and I could hear voices of another person inside. They were talking, but I could not tell what they were getting on about. So for like 10 minutes, I was just standing there waiting patiently, and peeking back at my mom occasionally to notice her of my presence at the checkout. And then another client entered the shop and was looking at the merchandise. She asked me where the vendor was, and I told her that he was in the trailer. At the sound of our conversation, the vendor peeked out from the trailer window and said to the woman, "We don't take any more clients, ma'am. We're closing soon." The woman left soon after. It seemed strange that he had decided to close so suddenly and so early. It was only 6 p.m., and usually the shops are closed later at 8 or even 9. I couldn't leave, and I was waiting to get my change back. when the vendor peeked from the trailer's window and said that he finally managed to get my change. And then he made a sign with his hand, as if to say to get inside. I was unsure about what he had wanted, so I said nothing, and I waited there, awkwardly. After a short moment, he peeked back and said, "You can come now." I was confused. Why couldn't he just come outside and give me my change back? And why the heck did he take so much time? I didn't say anything. Instead, I peeked back outside to see my mom. When she saw my concerned face, she finally decided to come and help me. I said to the seller, "Actually, I'm waiting for my mom." When my mom entered the shop, the seller got out of his trailer almost immediately and handed my change back. He was not frustrated anymore, but smiling and very talkative. He even asked my mom if we were from here, and to which she responded that we were from France and that we were spending the summer vacation in our hometown. My mom and I went to some other shops, but I could still see other clients coming to the shoe shop, even though he said he was closing soon. By the time my mom had finished up her shopping, it was 8 p.m., and on our way back I could still see the lights from his shop, and when we got closer, I could even see that he was using the same cash register that was supposed to be broken. At that age, I didn't realize how creepy this whole thing was. It just seemed odd and awkward. Years later, I finally realized that his gaze, his behavior, and his touches were all so wrong. And that night, I bet his intentions were even worse. Luckily, that night was the last time that I ever saw him. During the festival of the following year, I couldn't find his stand anymore. The slot was occupied by a street food stand. As a man in my 20s, I thought that I should share the 3 times that I was almost kidnapped while growing up. The first story happened when I was 4 or 5, and this happens to be one of my earliest memories. So one summer, my grandparents would invite my immediate family to go camping with them. They have an RV which was just big enough to cram all of us in. So we RV'd camped at a place called Goose Pond in northern Alabama. During this trip, my grandpa taught me how to ride a bike without training wheels. After many tries and falls, I was actually able to ride my bike pretty well. So, out of excitement, I asked my parents if my brother, who was a few years older than me, and I could go out to ride our bikes. They said that we could ride this short loop where about 60% of the loop can be seen from the RV. So my brother and I grabbed our bikes and we took off. While riding around the loop, nothing eventful ever happened until we had reached the final turn. This turn was barely out of view from my parents' end of the RV, so when my brother and I turned the loop, a car pulled up behind us. So we got off of our bikes and stepped off the road to let the car pass. When the car got parallel to us, it stopped. A man from the car rolled down his window and started talking to us. He said something along the lines of, "Hey, I have candy in my car if you want some. Just come over here and I'll give you a piece." Ignorant young me took a step in the man's direction, but as soon as I took that step, my brother grabbed my shoulder and said, "Let's go back to the RV." As soon as we had pedaled away, the man drove off. This second story happened when I was 10. For some background information, in my small hometown, the Civic Center basically shares a parking lot with the baseball fields. So my family was at the Civic Center to watch my little sister graduate from preschool. The graduation was around 5 p.m., and I had a baseball game at the fields next door at 7 p.m. So after the graduation, I asked my parents if I could walk across the parking lot to find my team while they cleaned up, and they gave me their blessing. As soon as I had walked out of the front door and turned to head to the baseball fields, I saw 2 men loitering in the parking lot. They saw that I was alone and they asked me to come over to them. Me being oblivious to the danger that I was in, said that I needed to get to my game that was going to start soon. They asked if I played baseball, and why my parents would let someone like me walk all by myself. They offered to walk with me, and I replied, "Oh, no thanks, I'm just going to the baseball fields." When they noticed that I wasn't cooperating, as they had originally hoped, one of the men lunged in my direction and grabbed me. Luckily, I was far enough away that he didn't get to me, and I took off. I don't think I've ever run faster in my life before this. Luckily, the men didn't run after me, and I found my team moments later. When my parents got to the field, they were panicking to find me. Apparently, someone had reported those two men hanging out in the parking lot in the Civic Center, and my parents were scared to death that they got me. My last story happened when I was 14. Again, as some background information, my house is located next to a major highway, with several gas stations and convenience stores within walking distance of it. My hometown is one of the safest towns in the state. Close to this incident, my town was ranked in the top 25 safest towns in the state. Because of this, my parents didn't mind if I walked to the store to grab snacks, as long as I had asked their permission first. So one day, I was walking to the store. Nothing happened on the way down there, so I walked into the store to buy some snacks. On the way back, I noticed a truck driving by me. When he passed, I looked up and saw the man driving was staring right at me. He wasn't paying attention to the road, just me. So he passed me, and I saw him turn around at the entrance of the neighborhood by my house and started heading back in my direction. At this time, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I see people turning around there all the time. When he drove by me the second time, he was going noticeably slower than the first time, and he was staring me down. When he got parallel to me, he stopped and opened his door to try to grab me. God must have been looking out to me, because as soon as he did this, a car had pulled out behind him and forced him to continue on down the road. As he drove away, I watched him and saw him turn around again and start heading in my direction. At this point, I was panicking. I took off behind my neighbor's house and hopped the fence into my backyard and went into my house. I remembered that I was home alone, and the terror started to sink in. I immediately rushed to the window to see the man carefully scanning the area where he last saw me. He was looking for me. He stayed in his car, going so slow that it took him what seemed like 5 minutes to pass my house. When he started to pass my house, I noticed that he was trying to see through my windows from the road. I ducked down and hid, only looking through the bottom corner of the window. Eventually, I saw him speed off, never to return again. As a boy growing up, people never thought these types of things could happen to me. It is a mystery to me how I was able to avoid kidnappers 3 times. Most people aren't that lucky. To all the young people and parents that are listening to this, it doesn't matter who it is, boy or girl. Bad people are lurking everywhere.